The vegan community has been a little rough this since October 6th, let's say, or October
Yes.
7th. I'm sorry, and
Yeah.
and I wonder. Well, I wanted to ask you, how has your experience been within, because it's one of those moments that has divided the entire world. It seems everyone, not just, but our community has also been divided about what's happening in the Middle East. We still have, I think, last time I checked, 130 hostages that have not been returned. We
Yeah.
have Lebanon and Iran. Everyone's watching Hezbollah and what's happening with the Shia in Iran. Things are getting things are getting more and more serious,
Yeah.
and it seems I have been one of the people that I like to say that I am on the side of peace. And if we're not talking about solutions, then shut up and you're along for the ride. This is you're picking a side doesn't really help. That's been my personal position. I don't want to. I'm on the side of peace. I want to look
Right.
at peaceful solutions. But how has your experience been inside the vegan community, and how have vegans reacted to the towards you and your community, your Jewish community, when it comes to what's going on in the world?
It has been very hard. I've probably received less direct, vicious attack towards me than a lot of my fellow Jewish vegans who are speaking out in support of Israel and its campaign to defeat Hamas,
Mhm.
which I speak out about as well. I, in my time in the social media world, had not yet cultivated like a huge vegan following. I've
Mm.
got lots of friends on the various platforms uh, whom I've connected with through veganism. But I myself was never like a lightning rod for what does Rick have to say on
Mm.
veganism? Um, but my friends who have been on the front lines of activism were regularly putting out lots of vegan content, who then were speaking up about their family in Israel or their concerns about anti-Semitism as it has spread, and kind of come out more prominently and threateningly, and just this revulsion at what happened on October 7th and the moral imperative. Sometimes our moral imperatives are to lay down our weapons, to not inflict suffering on
Mm.
completely helpless, innocent, sentient beings. And sometimes we're put in a situation where the reality is violence has been inflicted upon us or those we love, and who were innocent, and a sovereign nation has an obligation to protect its own citizens and civilians, and to unfortunately, to respond with violence against the perpetrators of violence, to stop them and prevent them from continuing to do what they continue to say they want to do repeatedly in Israel, to the Jewish people there, and throughout the world to Jews everywhere.
I mean,
So
this is something that, with the rhetoric coming from the again, you've got two right wing governments who are at
yeah,
war with one another. We have the
yeah,
fringes of each. That I don't stand with either, because I don't agree with Netanyahu's kind of hardlined approach that he's had for the last 20 years. I want to say he's been around. I've known that name Netanyahu for a very long time, and I want to
yeah.
say he's been around for a and
Yeah,
and
we're coming up on 30.
yeah,
Yeah,
30 years, and we've been it's been a long time since someone like Yasser Arafat was winning the Nobel Peace Prize. It's things have come a long way. Um, it's always been an existential threat, and it hasn't always been taken seriously that Hamas and other organizations like Hamas, they don't want an Israel. That
Right.
is, they don't want an Israel. That is so it's a constant existential threat, and so from time to time, Israel becomes an existential threat to its to those who are threatening Israel.
Right.
But but to me that's just like the facts of the land, and I understand as a Jew and as a person who's culturally Jewish and has a connection to people. Like I read recently that there's not a person living in Israel who doesn't have a family member who was killed in a terrorist attack. Like
Right.
those types of facts are startlingly um sobering, right? Startlingly sobering, if I can coin turn a phrase, a strange phrase to say, uh but as a vegan, there's another part that I wonder what you would expect from the vegan community because of this. Like, there are going to be people on the other side who see what's happening in Palestine, especially in Gaza, over the last 50 years. Since I've been alive, I've known about this brewing conflict, and from time to
Right.
time, this Cold War turns into a hot war, and we're in one of those hot moments right now. I feel like a lot of people don't have the perspective to realize that this is the first time, and it likely won't be the last time, that we have this hot armed ballistic exchange
Yeah.
um, between Israel and her neighbors. Uh, what do you say to the vegans that maybe they see what's happening in Palestine, and they see it, because it's the horrors of war. I mean, you'd be a hard-hearted man to say that, look at what's happening there, and not feel compassion toward the
Right.
children and women. I mean,
Oh, it's absolutely horrific. It's
so my
terrible.
it's horrible. Yeah, it's certainly the worst, to me, the worst modern in my lifetime, maybe the worst, because of the numbers and the percentages of each side of what they've lost,
Mhm.
is horrific. There's only 15 million Jews left on Earth,
Right.
and that's those numbers. When you take 1,000 Jews, that's a lot
Right.
of that's a huge percentage of who's left.
Right.
But okay, but what do you expect the vegan position to be? Because I struggle with that.
So I here's where I think we're going to come back to your conversation with George Martin. Um, is that uh, ideally there wouldn't be uh, the vegan perspective,
Mm.
um, that it gets really messy and
Well, perhaps not a vegan perspective. Maybe let
yeah,
me
yeah.
rephrase. Let me
I
rephrase. I mean to
right,
say that we are veganism is a community, whether we like it or not, and for all of its foibles, and we have problems. We're a
right,
divided community that's constantly like infighting, and like every other community,
yeah,
we can't agree on much. But I guess, like, when you've known vegan friends, you've known vegans, like, what would be what maybe not the vegan position, that shouldn't
yeah,
that shouldn't be
right,
possible.
right, right.
But I mean to say that, like, for vegans who aren't, they're not Palestinian, they're not Jewish,
Right.
they're
Right. So my initial default thought, expectation, hope was that there would be a compassionate response from people who are generally compassionate uh, towards me and their fellow and Jewish people they know who felt a deep impact by what happened on October 7th, that we were devastated.
yes.
We all felt like a part of our selves was, and that's, of course, even aside from people who had any direct connection to, to those who were taken hostage or murdered or injured. That
Well, yeah, it
just,
was like 9/11, except 100 times worse. It was the
right.
worst.
So,
It was the worst terrorist attack in the history of the world, and that's how I looked at it immediately. This is the worst
right,
terrorist attack in the history of the world.
right.
And
So yeah, I was just, there. So there was a handful of vegans whom I had cultivated relationships with online who did reach out to me in that compassionate way. Um, and I always tend to look on the bright side of things. I appreciated that. I didn't get hung up on all the people who didn't, but for a lot of my friends and other Jewish vegans I know, they were very conscious of the silence, the lack of a response, of supporting them emotionally, and I so fortunately I didn't have silence. I did have a handful of people who were very supportive and compassionate and kind and caring in the way that I would expect vegans to be. Um,
Mm,
and then of course once Israel began its response in attacking Hamas in Gaza, and all of the absolutely horrible devastation to way too many innocent civilians, because of the nature of this very small urban densely populated area and the way that Hamas, I mean, I don't want to get into all of
well,
it
it's
now, but
it's it's
you
modern
know,
it's modern warfare,
warfare,
and
right? And specifically a a death cult terrorist organization that embeds its militants in civilian
mhm,
populations in order to maximize civilian loss for the sake of martyrdom and for the sake of the PR campaign that they
sure.
wage. Um, and um, and so for people to understand that, and communicate that understanding to me, as opposed to a kind of knee jerk, superficial reaction to the definitely horrific results of what happens in a modern urban war situation, but
Mm,
translating that into a totally one sided condemnation of villain versus innocent. Um, that and then just the snowballing of that into all of the vicious incendiary condemnations and vilifications of Israel, which too often feels to us Jews, given our history, that it is extending to a blood libel type of
well, it's a synecdoche, right?
relation.
It's the idea that the one is taken as the whole, that all Jews are Israeli, and that's
Right.
again, we have nuance that I think
Yeah.
is not,
Yeah.
it doesn't fit on a
Right.
bumper sticker, but the word,
Right.
but you know what does? Free Palestine does, and that is something that I get really, I get bent out of shape about, because I feel like most people are speaking from a place of ignorance in,
Right.
and they'll say, well, what do you mean I'm ignorant? I've seen the videos. You've seen videos of modern war, and
Right.
it is a horror show. It is
Right.
something that that should not be happening, frankly. But
Right.
I wanted to ask you now. Let me venture off into a little bit more into the fog of war. I want to ask you
Mm,
from a place of ignorance.
mm,
I don't talk to very many religious people, but I have in my experience through what's happening here. I've heard lots of rabbis, actually, religious leaders, call for ceasefire, call
mm,
for peace talks, but
yeah.
I've not heard one um, from the Muslim community
Yeah.
say free the hostages,
Mm,
and I wonder, have you found, because you are in a religious world, you probably have Muslim religious leaders that you would call friends, or in your Rolodex, if you, obviously not a real Rolodex these days,
right.
but you probably know, usually religious folk, they know other religious folk, and have what has been your experience there? Am I completely off base? Why is it that every single day I hear about not Israeli, sorry, whoa, Jewish people calling for
Mhm.
ceasefire,
Yeah.
but I never hear Muslim people calling for hostage freedom?
Right. Right. I so I've spent the last 3 months, 4 months, whatever we're coming up on, 3.5,
Yeah.
mostly kind of retreating into supporting my fellow Jews, and particularly looking out for my fellow vegan Jews,
Mm.
and in particular, and probably a handful, in addition to Lauren, are watching this. I created a group on Instagram, just a DM chat group that is about 40 of us. That I titled it "Non-Jewish Vegan Allies,"
Hmm.
because there and it was that small handful that I mentioned before of my friends who were vegan, not Jewish, but caring about me, caring about the Jewish people, supportive of Israel's right to exist and need to defend itself, and but again, mostly just being kind and compassionate in the midst of all of this,
Yes.
reaching out to me. And then I was talking to a vegan Jewish friend, and I mentioned, well, I've benefited from this, small handful of allies. And she said, I haven't I haven't had any such people reach out to me, and I haven't even seen anything like posted online about from people who are not Jewish, who
Mm.
are expressing their empathy, and specifically not from vegans. And I realized that this friend needed to be connected to some of the friends who were reaching out to me. And so I shared with her several links to their Instagram profiles. And then I wrote to them and I said, you all just gained a follower. Uh, Follow her back. And, it'd be great just for you to connect with her the way you've connected with me.
Mm.
And then I realized, lo and behold, I had just created a group. And I said to this group that was like, 8 non-Jewish vegans and me, I said, all right, well, now we have a group. Well, what are we going to do with this? Like, but should I add more people to the group? And it was like, yeah. I said, and should it be just vegans? Yeah. So, so then I looked out for my fellow Jewish vegans who were being attacked by who had been sharing with me that they were getting attacked by fellow vegans
Yeah,
who
like
were,
online attacks. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and others who maybe were very strongly connected to support from within the Jewish world, and then others who were just sort of like silent, but who were liking things that I was posting, and like some of them I didn't even know were Jewish. I
Yeah.
was,
It's
were they allies or not? The friend whom I described earlier, I thought she was liking some of my things as an ally, and then she posted something at Hanukkah about her that had her daughter with her mother, so the little like a kid with her grandmother making potato latkes for Hanukkah. And I
uh-huh.
said, okay, that's not like ally activity here. That's that is she Jewish? And then I went back to her profile, and we had been friends on Instagram for the better part of a year. And her profile, she had added a Star of David emoji. And when I was chatting with her, and it led to this conversation about, no, I haven't heard from anybody. I said, you added that Star of David after October 7th, right? And she said, yeah, I did. And so there were people like that. So we've got this group now that is like it is now more Jewish people, but it is a place where the non-Jews who care about us and are deeply upset about the way that so many other vegans have been vilifying
Yeah.
Jews and Israel and taking such a one-sided approach, even to the point of supporting Hamas. I
This
mean,
is what I don't
to,
understand about this at all. Like,
right. I mean, to have compassion for the Palestinian people is 100% morally acceptable and appropriate and right. To support the fringe leadership of the Palestinian people, which sadly has co-opted a significant number of the Palestinian people who don't know anything else besides Hamas is our leaders and Israel's attacking us, and they're raising us to believe that Israel are, and Jews are just absolute villains. So they've created a whole bandwagon of their society. But then there are people in Gaza who are furious at Hamas. They have to be careful about if anyone in power finds out that they're saying those
well, I
things.
mean, they face a very literal. They'll be beheaded if they speak out against
Right.
their party or their political leadership. I
Right.
think that in a very kind of figurative way, you can say the same thing about in Israel. If we're not, it's strange to me that if I say that Israel has a right to defend itself because it's a sovereign nation, that shouldn't be a controversial thing, and
Right.
that doesn't implicitly support Benjamin Netanyahu and his
Right.
right wing government.
And we can still criticize
Yes.
specific actions of the IDF, or at least question them. I mean, we have international law, which sadly right now appears to be a farce.
Well,
With
it's a farce because America's lost its footing as the
right.
as I mean, this is an American problem. America made this happen, as far as I'm concerned,
Mm,
with the last 7 years of leadership. I think that we've allowed it to occur, and I'm terrified what will happen next. We allowed what
mm,
happened in the Ukraine to occur. We're
mm,
allowing this to happen, and what's next? Something I know that something will happen next, and we'll be spread too thin to do anything about it, and then you're in a world war. If something happens in Taiwan right now, what does the world look like then? We have English airstrikes in the Middle East now. We have
right.
American airstrikes in the Middle East already. We're actively bombing countries in the Middle East. This is a development this week that it's terrifying, and it's because we allowed it to go this far.
Yeah, I'm gonna close my blinds. I forgot
No,
to do that. It was dark when we started, and everyone can see how the sun has risen. That's
that's okay.
easy.
It's beautiful.
I'll be right back.
It's a, here comes the sun. Well, I take the rising sun as a symbol of hope. So I
There
think
you
that
go. Right, and we
yeah,
can put on we can put on blinders. Can you hear me? By the way,
I can.
just plug back in. Okay, great. Yeah, we can use literal blinders to not be overwhelmed by the brightness, but I pray for more light, for more enlightenment,
Yes.
for more wisdom. Uh, we as human beings, it comes back to we're volatile beings. We are we get scared, we get reactive, and those of us who have moral compass and want to act and who care and don't want to just sit and uh, feel powerless. And we're on the other side of the world from where all this stuff is happening. So
Mm,
we want to speak out and we want to do something that feels like we're doing something, and that has translated into a lot of war of words, and that's become a lot more divisive,
yes.
particularly in the way that it's fracturing a movement that I'm not going to change most people's minds. uh, I can try to point out, well, here's the side that you're not aware of. Here's what you are saying, but there's more to it.
Mm,
I don't know what I don't know what impact that's going to have, but at the very least, it would have been nice. And I don't know if we can get back to it. I'm not sure how deep this fracture has become within the vegan world for people to feel comfortable advocating together as activists for the cause that we're all united on, when we're at odds with each other and uh,
yeah.
calling each other out, and it's hard both ways. Like, oh well, you called me a Zionist Nazi,
Hmm.
um, so I don't want to, you know. So like now I feel alienated. But even if like you didn't say anything, but I saw you at the vegan gathering last night, and then today I see that you shared pictures of your attending a rally or a protest that is, ostensibly pro-Palestine, but where a lot of the chanting and a lot of the posters,
Calling for the end of Israel. Right.
right, and people can say that the other way. That the mostly Jews aren't gathering for marches and rallies. There was a big one in Washington D.C. in November, and there was controversy about the range of voices
Mm.
were included there. Uh,
Well, I mean, the only gatherings that I've actually seen are prayer. Actually, when things first started popping off, I was in Chicago, and the entire hotel was all of a sudden they were renting out the large convention space to have prayer.
mm,
And that's, I mean, I haven't seen, and I was on college campuses all through from October 7th till Christmas,
wow.
and I saw a lot of marches on college campuses, and
Yeah.
right there in the thick of it. But you're right. You don't see the Jews gathering in these in that way. In that way,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So, it's I don't know where that's leading. Like a lot of my Jewish vegan friends are saying, I'm going to continue uh, to do activism, but I'm not going to do it with the groups of people that I was
Yeah.
doing it with before.
There's ones
Uh,
that I mean, there's people that I've valued and admired that have really cast themselves in a different light since I've
right.
and mostly, and I think most of it comes from a when you said, the light, bring light and compassion, that's something that I think is lacking, and that's something that's
Yeah.
strange to me with veganism. It's, I feel like veganism is always about this critical thinking and
Right.
looking behind the curtain, putting glass walls on the slaughterhouse, and then you have something like this happen and everyone wants to jump to conclusions and not investigate at all, just like, oh, I
Right.
saw a video on the internet and now I'm going to make a statement.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so complicated in terms of the dynamics of that process, because we would love it if the number of people who in the past 3 months have responded to what they're seeing on the surface, that's projecting this message of mass suffering, and now they're taking a stand. But
Mhm.
okay, now first of all, what is the stand?
They don't
It's
have to do anything. It's the easiest stand in the world to take. To change
exactly
your profile picture. That's so,
right.
it's so simple. That's how it
Put in
always is.
an emoji. Right,
You have
right.
The
So
Ukraine flag behind your face on your Facebook profile. They don't have to do anything. Half of
right,
them, like most of them, aren't even giving monetary support to the
right.
team that they agree with.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's just they're just sharing and stories and TikToks and but I
it's virtue
I
signaling.
yeah, yeah. And what if, like you said, the glass houses of slaughterhouses, right? Like
Mm.
that, and that's not politically controversial unless you're part of big ag.
Yeah,
Um, or oh, my family had been ranchers forever.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but
yeah.
like there's no morally justifiable response. When people say, oh, there's no morally justifiable response for what Israel is doing, well, we can look carefully and pick things apart, but are you saying that a sovereign nation doesn't have a morally justified obligation, let alone right, but an obligation to respond in a firm way to defend their own? It's almost like when we hear the carnists pulling out all their tricks about the crop deaths,
Right.
right? And then it's
Mhm.
like, well, no, it would be great if we had veganic farming.
Right.
It
If
would
the, only vegans were farmers, yeah, only
right,
farmers were,
right.
yeah, yeah.
But like, given the reality of the world we live in, like, what are we going to let various pests and insects bring disease to our crops? Like, we're going to have to deal with the reality, and there
Right,
is
we
going to
live in a
be
real world. Yeah, I
right.
completely get where you're going with
So
that. I would say though too, just what I find particularly galling is that even if you're against what's happening in Gaza, where does this where does that lead? Because immediately we get to the point where we're talking about the destruction of Israel. That's what we're actually talking about. We're talking about no more Israel.
right,
And that's something that I don't know what like, and then they'll well, no, that's what's on the line. Like
yeah, yeah,
if you want to talk about what's happening in Gaza, that's fine. And if you want to be against the bombing, I understand. It's horrible. But at the end of that, okay, agreed, horrible. What are we actually talking about? We're talking about a two-state solution or a one-state solution. And
right,
and only one group wants a two-state solution. So
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what
yeah,
we're
yeah,
and this is something that it kills me that that's not even acknowledged because that's what's on the line. We're talking about we're talking about killing all the Jews. That's what we're really talking about. And
yeah. Thank you for saying it. Thank you.
and and they won't even get that far. That's how simple minded the assessment is of these vegan influencers and all and others who are chanting and changing their profile pictures, leaving
Right,
making these posts. They don't even get to the point that they're so ignorant they don't even know that's what we're talking about.
right, right. They just don't. And, there've been all kinds of studies that people, significant percentages of people, they're chanting from the river to the
That's
sea.
the worst one.
Well,
Boils my blood.
right. I mean, it's like from the river to sea. What? First of all, the original phrase in Arabic, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be Arab."
Yeah.
Uh, it's not about freedom, but even when you even when you change it to be the cute English rhyme, the freedom isn't like so that we can have a Palestinian state
No.
that coexists, so that all people can be free in this
And live
land.
in peace and yes.
Right. It is free to live in the entirety of the land, which is only ours, which the Jews have no claim to. And then it gets back to what you're saying is like, so then what?
What happened to all those Jews?
So the
Yes.
7+ million Jews, plus the 2 million plus Israeli Arabs, most of whom do identify as Palestinian, who, if we were to just say, okay, Hamas, come on in and like, you now have the whole land, like the whole almost 10 million Israelis are then in danger because Hamas doesn't tolerate any enemy who
No.
has spoken out against them. So by virtue of being Israeli, I mean, that's what we saw on October 7th. It
Right.
wasn't all just Jews who were murdered. It was people from various other countries throughout the world who were working in Israel,
Various faiths, various
and
countries, various
and
ethnicities.
significant number of Arab Israelis.
And
There's
that's the other thing. Like, you can be Arab and serve in parliament in Israel. Like, this is
on the
not.
Supreme Court.
You could be in the Supreme Court as an Arab in Israel.
Mhm.
What do you mean by free right now? And I know what they mean. I don't
Yeah.
think they know. I don't think they know what they mean
Right.
because
The American, blue-haired, uh, septum ring, and I don't have anything against those, but that's sort of the stereotype of people who, it it becomes a fashion. I think that's why there's some meaning in terms of identifying that sort of college student or 20 something
Mhm, mhm.
American who has adopted a fashion for their hair, for their piercings, and then the Palestinian cause becomes a part of that, but they don't understand the details or the nuance. They can't even tell you which river and which sea.
Yeah.
That's, that's what the research shows is
They
like,
don't know what river, what sea.
no,
You're totally right.
they thought it was the Dead Sea and the Euphrates River. Um, and then they'll pick up another sign, uh, and it'll say, down with the white settler racist colonial state.
Yeah, it does.
And an
I had
interviewer
A
said,
Jew telling
well, what
me.
does that mean? And the person said literally, well, to be honest with you, I just showed up and I just picked up the sign and I'm not really, oh, it's had apartheid on it. And the person said, I
What
actually
is
don't know
apartheid?
what apartheid means. Oh, and it also said something about intifada. And the interviewer said, do you know what intifada means? And a couple of people there said, no, we don't.
Another word that's evolved over
So,
time, another
yeah,
word that means something different today than it did 100 years ago. So, I mean, I guess I guess I would commiserate a little bit with people in college because I know that that's when I went vegan, and that's when you have this strong sense of like, what does injustice look like? What does oppression
right,
look like? And so
right,
you're forming these ideas, and then someone says, "Look at this on TikTok. These are young women and children being killed in Gaza." It's like you're primed for that type of reaction, and yet without nuance, it's not. You can't start thinking about 1,000-year-old grudge
right,
with a TikTok, a 6-second TikTok video.
right,
And people want to talk to me in the comments of YouTube. I'm like, this is not where we will have this discussion
right,
because we cannot have an erudite discussion about what's gone on in the YouTube comments section.
right,
It
right,
can't be
right.
done.
Yeah,
But I love
yeah,
that you have these groups that you're that a group that you're a part of, and you have that community. I'm really I take heart in that. I'm glad, and
yeah.
I'm happy you're over in Denver, making at least changing some hearts and minds when it comes to veganism, and maybe a little bit about what's going on in the Middle East today. And
Yeah, yeah, and just to get back to what's happening on the ground here in Denver in terms of veganism, there is an effort that's happening in other Jewish communities to have an impact outside of that fringe, super traditional Orthodox world of yes, we can protest kaparos. There's not much of that goes on in Denver. That's going to be
mm,
more in New York and the
one
bigger
thing, yeah.
cities. But that's also that's a real uphill battle, like we were saying before. What we can do, there's the default veg movement. We can have communities, synagogues, and other organizations making a commitment to have more plant-based options when
Mm,
there are big events and to sort of shift. Denver as a city passed for its official city events, which is the same thing that happened in New York hospitals, is default veg. Like any event, or if you're a
yeah.
patient in a New York City hospital, it's a plant-based menu, and then the options are not, oh, can I have the vegan meal instead? The option is, I want to have the meat meal. So those are sort of baby steps from a
Well,
animal.
Denver's taking some big steps too. I mean, the fur ban is going to be on the ballot this year in November.
Yes,
So is
and
the slaughterhouse ban.
And
I
I
collected
worked.
signatures for that.
I petitioned and was involved in that group.
Oh, me
Um,
too. Awesome. When I
yeah,
was in Denver, I collected signatures at the farmers market with the group that was involved.
that's
Yeah,
exactly what I did. Yeah, and that is exciting. The fur ban will probably pass. I
yeah.
hope it passed in Boulder. And it passed in the whole state of California. The slaughterhouse ban is less likely to, but I think it's a consciousness raiser.
It
And
depends. I mean, there's only one slaughterhouse left. I mean,
exactly
if
right,
your ballots look anything like they do in California, it usually has a little couple sentences about what the impact will be, and
right,
the impact is that one slaughterhouse will be closed, and then
right. And it's an environmental disaster.
right.
It's in
Hmm.
a poor neighborhood. I mean, it has
It
all of
poisons the river, the Platte. What's it, the Platte or whatever? I forget what that's
the
called.
Platte River.
The
Yeah,
Platte River. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, it's something that's
They've been in violation 3 years in a row
yeah.
of
The
the Clean
EPA
Air
always is
Act or
trying to
something like
right.
that. Yep. Those are good things that are happening. And then yeah, obviously, uh, my little corner of the world is like the two things that are most important to me are my Jewish identity and the values that I draw uh, from a traditional Jewish perspective that meet my modern sensibilities and a rationally derived morality. Like I'd be vegan whether I was,
Right.
Jewish or not. And as
Mm.
far as I know, I came to it originally not from, well, I've studied all of the classical texts. And
Yeah,
so,
right. Yeah, yeah. I've
I,
dissected it and done a post mortem on it one more time.
right.
Yeah.
Some people have gone that route, but like most of us, we see the reality of the suffering, um, and uh, and we're changed morally, and then we need to sort of figure out, well, these other things that are important to me, can they integrate? And I'm an integrationist.
Yeah. Well,
Like
one
I want
once
my world to be holistic, and
that makes perfect sense to me. I mean,
yeah,
I've always said that one philosophy is not enough, is not sufficient for one human being. You need to have
right,
a few tools in your tool belt. And if you have
right,
a philosophy of veganism and that speaks to your religious philosophy, that makes perfect sense to me because
right.
I contain multitudes, as Walt Whitman said,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think that's really important as a human being. But speaking of your corner, let's land the plane. Why can't you tell people where they can find you and tell everyone where they can follow you, what platforms they can find Rabbi Rick?
Sure. So on Facebook, I'm Rick Brody. It's you can find me there if you want to refine your search to Denver. You could do that. And on Instagram, I am Salisbury Rick, SOLSBURYRICK. That's because, and it's interesting in the time we're in. I'm a big Peter Gabriel fan, and his song Salisbury Hill is
Interesting.
like an anthem for me. And you're laughing because he's been pretty outspoken in the past, um, uh, about injustices that Israel has committed against Palestinians, or even its own Arab Israeli population. And
Hmm.
I'm sympathetic to criticism.
Yes.
I've never heard him say anything about Israel not having a right to exist or being a settler colonial
Yeah.
state that should be eradicated. And I saw him in concert. He came to Denver 1 week after October 7th. It was Monday, uh,
Ooh.
so Monday the 9th, and then a week later it was Monday the 16th. So it was all like really raw. And
Mm.
uh, and so I showed up there and was wearing my kippah, my head covering.
Yeah.
A woman came up to me towards the end of the concert and she said, I just want you to know how terrible I feel about what happened in Israel, and my heart is with you, and I stand with
Wow.
you, and I'm so glad that you're here and that you're expressing your identity and your pride. And I don't think of it as pride. I just think of it, this is just what I do. But there are places where I just put on a baseball cap where, I'm not gonna
Sure.
want
Yeah.
to
You
like
want to,
draw
you
that
want
much
you don't want
attention.
to fly the flag, right? Yeah, I get
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
But I was wearing it there. I was with my teenage son, and I was wondering, what's now like a week prior, U2 in concert. Uh, I saw many clips from like different concerts in subsequent days that Bono changed the lyrics to Pride. Interesting, in the name of love. Here we are, just a couple days
Yeah.
after Martin Luther King Day. So very very fitting, and he sort of dedicated it to the victims at the Nova concert. The several hundred who were murdered there and taken captive. It was very sympathetic. Peter did not say anything specific. He ended the second encore was Biko, Stephen Biko, South African
Mm,
activist, murdered in prison
yeah.
after being arrested. Um, and he just said, we can continue to find inspiration, paraphrasing, from those who have stood up to injustice and done what is right, and even to the
Mm.
point of risking their lives. And I appreciated his very tactful approach in not explicitly making any associations
Oh,
and
yeah, that makes sense.
like
Yeah.
but anyhow,
A little tact is the least one could
yeah,
expect when something like that.
and,
But
and
I appreciate that you're a Peter Gabriel fan, but I mean, I would definitely change my Instagram handle to Rabbi Rick Brody. Just saying, because Rabbi Rick's got a good name to it.
well, I
Good
will I
ring.
will take your suggestions, Guy. I will do that. I will be at Rabbi Rick, maybe just Rabbi Rick if no one else
If it's
has
not
it.
taken,
I'm
yeah.
not, I'm not sure. I haven't looked. Or Rabbi Rick Brody. Sure, I'll do that. And I used to have a blog, but I haven't posted there in a while. But if you Google Rabbi Rick Brody, you'll find some other neat stuff about me. Um,
Okay.
uh, and if we want to, since we're sort of wrapping up, if we want to end on like a cute light note, is
Yes.
that I get sought out when someone wants like a rabbi slash something, right? Like, so I want a vegan rabbi.
Yeah.
Back in the day, in 2008, I was living in LA. They in Hollywood, they were
Mm.
looking for a rabbi contestant to be on Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
You were on
And
all. You.
they did a whole audition process. They like recruited rabbis to come and audition. And I was on Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? They set it up as like a Reverend versus Rabbi. No joke, Reverend Rick.
Reverend Rick and Rabbi Rick.
An Episcopal minister,
I
Reverend
love
Rick.
it.
And I was on the show, and I had the chance to kind of talk a little bit about Judaism,
Were
and
you smarter than
I
a fifth grader?
no, I was not.
No
No,
one's smarter than a fifth
I
grader.
was I made my way up. I got pretty close, and then I got a little thrown off the sort of pressure, the lights, the
Yeah,
music, um,
game
and I
shows. That's what they do. They're trying to push you off your game. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, but I left with $25,000, and
Hey, that's
that was a lot of fun, and you could find that on the internet too.
Rabbi
In
Rick, smarter than a fifth grader.
2008. Yeah. So that's been some of my fun stuff. So yeah, I'm happy for people to follow me, which I'm public on Instagram. You don't have to request, you can just follow.
Hmm.
Uh, Facebook, uh, we need to have mutual friends in order for you to add me, but I'm friends with a lot of vegans, so
You
probably
might be.
a
Some
lot
people
of
in the chat
vegans.
probably are. Awesome.
Yeah,
Very cool. Well, I appreciate you coming by. I've got to go do some
pleasure.
activism, but
Yeah, I gotta
I
go do a funeral.
yeah, oh,
Uh,
jeez,
yeah,
a very
yeah,
different vibe we're gonna have today.
right.
But I'll be standing in front of photos of dead chickens, and you'll actually be dealing with the Grim Reaper himself. So that's something that we'll go our separate ways. But yeah, I hope you'll come back one day. We can talk some trash about Ben Shapiro and take something like that. Maybe when.
I would love to be back, and I've subscribed now to the show, so hopefully I'll watch from time to time at least.
Yeah,
Thanks, Lauren. You have a great day too. You gorgeous vegan, you,
gorgeous
uh,
vegan.
and keep up the great work you're doing.
Thanks, Rabbi
Um,
Rick. I
Thank
appreciate
you,
that.
Sky. It's been fun. Thanks everyone for watching. See you around.
Yeah, see you later, Rabbi Rick. Thank you.